As entrepreneurs, we are rewarded for rational thinking, knowing our numbers, being able to analyze a market, and thinking big picture. So we spend a lot of time in our heads. But being in our heads can also make us feel stressed or anxious. We let our imaginations run wild and get the most of us. We brood, we get stuck in our thoughts, and sometimes we have a hard time getting out of there. What if there was a way to break out of the doom loop of anxiety, to calm down our nervous system, and to feel more alive? That's exactly what I'll be talking about in this episode with my guests, Jeff Benton and Brett Weinroth. They are the leaders of Paragon Performance Evolution, a company that blends the best of modern science and human behavior with timeless wisdom to deliver unprecedented results for their clients. We talk about how to tap into our heart's wisdom, rejuvenate ourselves, and give guidance when we need it the most. I really loved this conversation with Jeff and Brett. They were both on stage with us at the inaugural Conscious Entrepreneur Summit in 2022, and I've been a keen follower of their work ever since. I hope you enjoy this episode of The Conscious Entrepreneur. Great. Hi, and welcome back to The Conscious Entrepreneur. My guests today are Jeff Benton and Brett Weinroth. They are partners in Paragon Performance Evolution, which is a company that really helps entrepreneurs and executives get through roadblocks in their life, overcome friction points, and reach their maximum potential. They work with amazing companies all around the world and have just done such tremendous work at matching heart and mind and showing up as a full body superhero. So I'm really excited to have Jeff and Brett here on the show. Good to see you both.
Good to see
Great
you.
to see you, Alex.
Thanks for that intro.
God, we haven't seen you since your first amazing summit, which we were honored to be a part of, truly. And I saw your lineup this year with Keith and a bunch of others. I mean, it just keeps getting better and better.
It does. So Conscious Entrepreneur Summit #1, you guys were both there. You did that talk on heart-mind connection. And this was in May of 2022 in Denver. This year, 2023, we had 200 people, so twice as big.
Wow.
And we hosted up in Boulder. The speaker lineup was incredible. But most importantly, like, people are just feeling connected, and we're giving them tools and ideas and resources on how to be more effective as entrepreneurs. And so, I love doing that. I love that mission. I love having folks like the two of you in support of it and being able to highlight the work that you're doing, because, one of the problems that entrepreneurs get into, and, I certainly include myself as someone who has this problem, is I get living all up in my head. I get stuck in my head, hyper analytical, rational. I ruminate on stuff. I get stuck in these typical thought patterns. And the techniques that you brought last year that I want to hear more about were breathing, breath, embodiment, feel the entire body. And then you also talk so much about the heart and developing heart coherence and managing heart rate variability and just being in tune with other parts of the body. So I just want to open up by saying, I think this is so valuable for entrepreneurs. You have both done so much study between, meditating and HeartMath Institute and Joe Dispenza's work and all the other places that you've learned from. I would love if you could synthesize, what have you learned in your experience of working with so many companies and entrepreneurs, and how are you informing the typical entrepreneur who wants to get out of their head and feel more alive?
It's a great question, Alex. I appreciate that we have the space to talk about it. Jeff and I are really passionate about this. I think the simple, answer to that is, when we're stressed, to remind people, leaders, members of teams, the stress is not in the circumstance causing the stress. The stressor, as we like to say, the stress actually is in your body. And when you understand that it's a physiological reaction that then triggers a psychological reaction, right? In terms of the way the heart communicates with the brain. And we actually have control over our bodies. We have ownership, right, over this amazing vessel. And if And that was an aha for us as we went through our own personal experiences to adopt these techniques as part of our own routines, but now now teaching it on a regular basis to leaders, to teams, is understanding the role that their emotions play and how it's connected to their physiology. And I think when we pass along that little nugget, the bulb gets just a smidge brighter for people that go through our programs. I'm simplifying it, obviously.
So that was the stress is not the stressor. So the thing that I think is getting me worked up, and it could be something as simple as traffic, or it could be a big deal like a team member is quitting to go work for another company, or some big thing in an entrepreneur's mind. I've got to separate the situation from my reaction to the situation. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of our favorite things that has really resonated, that, like Brett said, the stress lives in the body and not in the circumstance. And the beautiful thing about that is we can always shift the chemicals in our body, right? We're truly the creators of our own world. So as you mentioned, HeartMath has been a beautiful partner. We always want to give them a shout out because there's so much of our teachings, our program, our inspiration, and these tools and techniques that they have developed over 30 years. One, we love it because it's all based on peer-reviewed research, right? Science with Stanford and Department of Defense and Harvard. But they are tools and techniques that entrepreneurs, conscious entrepreneurs, everybody can use in real time and within minutes. And so much of our work, even at a global level, is just explaining what happens when we're in a stress response, right? So when we feel stressed, we limit key parts of the brain, in particular our frontal cortex, which is the smart thinking part of the brain. So we're limited in our problem solving, in our communication, a number of other things, and also our ability to have empathy and see somebody else's point of view. Right. And so even when we work with diversity, equity, inclusion, or when we do work with the global first ladies or G20 or UN, we say we can create all the policy change, and it's beautiful, all the events, all the networking. But if we don't teach people how to get out of a stress response, they're going to be limited in how they can show up. And this is just science. And the beautiful thing is we've seen it with thousands and thousands and thousands of executives. As we teach them these tools and techniques, and they go from a stress response to a more optimal state, which we call coherence, it literally enables them to think more clearly, communicate more effectively, and have deeper empathy. And, Brett and I like to say we do high performance and leadership resiliency, but it's really a Trojan horse to increase consciousness and awareness of leaders. And we see that when leaders start to do these tools and techniques, and also, buy into our overall teachings, right, around, humanity and how they can contribute, as they start to relate to themselves differently, they relate to others differently, and they start to make better decisions beyond themselves, right? Because again, when we're in that fight or flight, that stressed out state, our brain is wired to survive, and it looks for threats. And until we make a conscious choice to then have gratitude, joy, presence, collaboration, connection beyond ourselves, it just doesn't happen. But the minute we lead programs that create this, and each individual chooses this, they start to build new neurological networks that then support it, right? That this is actually a good thing.
And so stress not only makes me feel agitated, I already know it's bad for my health. What you're telling me is stress makes me dumber because it's turning off parts of my brain that are useful for problem solving and communication and creative thinking. And it activates my stress response or my threat response even more. So I feel more threatened. I feel I probably become more vigilant of threats or more sensitive to potential threats. And so if I'm not interrupting that, then I'm going down a very difficult path. And what we're trying to do and what hopefully we can learn from you guys on is, how can I interrupt that pattern? How can I then, like you use the word awareness, Jeff, how can I become more aware of what's happening and therefore step into a different frame of mind?
Yeah, exactly. And as we talk about this path of evolution or self-mastery, the number one thing is to have awareness of our thoughts and emotions. Because without that, we can't change. And it sounds simple, but it's as simple as hard as that. And then the second thing is to have these tools and techniques, right, to shift into a more optimal state. And Brett's actually going to lead us through one at the end of the session. But one of the things I was going to say is we've done a lot of data simulations around this, and also our partners in HeartMath. And one of the ones we always share is they worked with first responders and they put them through a sort of a high stress situation, a simulation. And after they went through the simulation, it wasn't even real, a simulation, their heart rate stayed elevated for many hours, some up to 6 to 8 hours. And so when our heart rate is elevated, right, it's beating up our bodies. Again, it's impairing key brain functions. And as we've seen in the media, you know, our law enforcement and SWAT teams, they're under so much stress, they're making some poor decisions, right? And so after they were taught the tools and techniques for 4 weeks, and then they went through the simulation, this high stress simulation again, they were able to reduce their stress response from many hours to just a few minutes. So think how powerful that is, right? And our bodies don't know the difference, right? So if it's a SWAT team member, a first responder, or if it's somebody in the office getting an email that really makes them mad, our body reacts the same way, right? We're constantly going into that fight or flight when we're not in danger.
And the personal component of this is so important when you think about an entrepreneur and all the pressure they're under to keep a business, you know, afloat, to generate profitability, especially if they have investors, to keep their team members engaged, to keep their customers happy. If they have stress and strife outside of their work, outside of the business, within their family, whether it's with kids, family members, what have you, those emotions are being carried through into everything they're doing in the business. They just don't always realize it, right? And so as Jeff said, if you have a moment of anger or frustration and it starts at home, if you have, you know, young adults or teenagers like I do, and you have something going on there, the impact that it can have when you try to transition into your professional, you know, when you put your professional hat on, you just can't flip the switch on and off because the chemicals in your body don't know the difference. And if we do this over and over again, we have these patterns that the brain constantly goes back to. We call them a baseline, right? And so if there are things that trigger you in your life and you don't know how to shut off the stress response, you're just going to constantly be in this space where you're inhibiting your ability to be the best version of you. Right. So when we go through the programs, it's like, imagine those days where you feel like you're in flow. You're just killing it. Every meeting is going well. Your communication is clear and direct. Deals are happening. And now imagine a better version of that version of you, right? You're handling things with grace and ease. And what we find is for most leaders, that happens, but it doesn't happen with consistency. It might be the adrenaline that carries them. It might be a fleeting moment that they're trying to recapture. And so instead, they're just persisting, they're pushing, they're pressing, it has to be hard. The suffering.
It's not their default state, and their baseline could be lower. And, you know, like, Brett, so if I take what you were just saying there, you know, there's multiple situations because there's, you know, everyone has different roles. So maybe I'm doing one thing in the family in the morning and I've got work and I've got other stuff. You know, if I reflect back on what Jeff was just saying, also, if my heart is still stressed and accelerated from something that happened at one point in the day, I can essentially be carrying that stress with me into a whole new situation. So my fuse is shorter, right? My anxiety is up. I'm more likely to make either a bad decision or say something that I haven't fully thought through, which can have damaging consequences. And that could have nothing to do with the situation I'm in. I have simply carried everything from a previous stressful situation for me. So I guess this means if we can learn to at least create some pauses and space between those experiences, that'll help us. But most importantly, if we can become aware of the triggers and what's actually happening in our mind, in our body, in our hearts, then that makes us even more effective. Did I get that right?
It's a good summation. And in the situation you just described, there's a lot of energy being spent on the past or worrying about the unknown of the future. And there's less time being spent in the present moment. One of the great things about the tools and the techniques that we are able to share with our clients is it actually helps them not only become more connected into their full body rather than just the mind, right? They get connected from the neck down, but they start to appreciate the present moment with more clarity, with more gratitude, with more appreciation. Because as we know, everything that's ever happened in our lives has happened in the present moment.
Yeah.
But yet we're burning so much of our fuel ruminating on a conversation we had yesterday, or, an argument we had with someone in our life that morning, or we're thinking about what's happening, later in the day or tomorrow. And we're really not keeping our eye on the ball. And the body, our physiology is reacting to that accordingly, right? It's pumping the cortisol, the adrenaline,
right,
all these hormones that we associate with stress, which are great in moderation, right? As the research says, we need cortisol, we need adrenaline for certain things in our lives, but we don't want them in sixth gear all the time.
And it blows my mind. It blows my mind to think that my body doesn't know what time it is. Meaning my body doesn't know if I have a thought. My body doesn't know if this is a past thought, a future thought, or a present thought. And so I'm basically polluting my mind when I'm either dragging something up from the past or I'm projecting into the future about, I have to have a tough conversation with such and such or whatever it is. All I'm doing is creating stress for my body now because it's not able to separate out what's actually happening from my imagined reality.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Alex. And when we go through our trainings, we always emphasize that. So we will, with these leadership teams, have each individual identify an ongoing stressor, and we'll ask them what it is, what emotion they feel, and how do they react to it. So one, by just doing that, but it creates greater awareness for them in the future, right? To be able to recognize it, to make another choice. And then we say to them, like, your body doesn't know the difference between the actual situation and a memory. So how many of you have just experienced that stress? And most of them raise their hand. And then it's an aha, right? And, we always joke, like, even Joe Dispenza always talks about like going up to the angry guy and saying, why are you so angry? And, the guy says, my mother-in-law said this to me 30 years ago, and, we're just, until we actually create awareness and consciousness of our thoughts and emotions, we're just being driven by the past, right? So we've got 60 to 70,000 thoughts. 90% are the same as the day before.
Per day. Yeah.
Per day. 60, and then 70 to 80% are like detrimental or negative. And then, 95% of our operating system, our thoughts, actions are run by the subconscious. So if we don't create that awareness, it's Groundhog Day every day. We just keep recreating the past into the future, right? And you can't make changes there. And so with our tools and techniques and teachings, we've really seen amazing transformation in an expedited way.
So we have 60 to 70,000 individual thoughts per day, 90% of which are the same thoughts as I had yesterday. So I'm basically living on it's like the same scene, the same Groundhog Day. I'm living next to the same noisy highway full of bullshit thoughts is what you were saying, right? It's like built in my backyard and it's constantly going by. Right. And so knowing that statistic, like, how do I interrupt? How do I change that number to either reduce the number of thoughts, reduce the number of unhelpful thoughts, or reduce the number of thoughts that are the same as yesterday, meaning be more creative or access other areas?
The beautiful thing is our brain is plastic and it's capable of changing. And so we can rewire the brain to be a more optimal version of ourselves in the moment. And we do that through these tools and techniques by helping people generate more coherence within their body. So, coherence normally is an interconnectedness of the parts or communication between the parts, right? We can have coherence like within this technology we're using to tape this podcast. We have coherence within a team. If you watch 11 members of a football team all operating, there's good coherence there. We're talking about physiological coherence and specifically the way the heart is communicating with the brain and the link of the nervous system between those two. And so first thing we want to do is we want to activate the braking component of our nervous system when we're feeling stress. It's called the parasympathetic branch. And we do that by slowing our breath down, right? Like when, we know with little kids, when they fall and they hyperventilate from the fall or the cut on their elbow, we just tell them to breathe, slow down. So first we want to slow the breathing down. We emphasize to focus on the area of the heart because where we place our attention is where we place our energy. So we want to shift the energy in the area of our heart. We can then send a signal to the nervous system that everything's okay. I know you're in a hurry for this meeting and this traffic is thick, but there's not a whole lot we can do about it. So there's no point in getting worked up. So we slow ourselves down. We bring ourselves more into the present moment. We give our bodies a chance to start the chemical shift that Jeff talked about. The second piece of that is, can we go from an emotion that drains our energy, frustration, anger, irritation, into a more renewing state? And that could just be calm or ease. It might be gratitude or appreciation. If you can really get to joy or excitement about whatever it is, you're about to go do, but we also need to be realistic. And, we always talk about when we work with the military and they say, look, I can't connect with that beach vacation or get into a place where I am feeling true passion or happy. And we say, okay, can you connect with pride? Can you connect with honor? Can you connect with courage? All of these are renewing emotions. And when we combine the activation of the heart rhythm patterns into a more smooth, rhythm that's sending a clear signal to the brain, and we can then connect with a positive renewing emotion, now we're turning, there's about 1,400 physiological changes that happen in the body when we do this.
1,400?
Including the release, this is what the research says, including the release of the good chemicals, the oxytocin, right? Called the love chemical, the dopamine, something called DHEA, which is our vitality hormone. It's also known as your anti-aging hormone. And for the science geeks listening in, Jeff and I love this stuff. DHEA and cortisol come from the same precursor cell. If you raise your DHEA levels, you limit the overdrive of cortisol in your system in a healthy way. And so if you do the techniques enough on a consistent basis, your body and your mind will start to become used to this feeling of being renewed, being still, being calm, being present. Listen, Jeff and I are go type A personalities, right? I mean, this is our background. We've got careers in business development where there was a lot of imposter syndrome. I know we're going to get into some of these topics when we talk about, the life of an entrepreneur. And so it was hard. I know for me, it was really hard when I started the shift of being more mindful to just sit for a minute and meditate. It was really challenging.
It was challenging to do, or was
this guy's transformation, and I was inspired. And I looked at it as we always say, meditation is not supposed to be a competitive sport, but in a way, it can be.
Comparing each other's meditations. Yeah, and so what you're saying is, if I'm in a place where I'm feeling a high level of stress or frustration or anxiety, maybe I can't go straight to joy, right? Or ecstasy, sort of feelings. But if I can start to at least move up the pyramid, I'm doing myself a favor, it sounds like. And as far as I'm aware, when we do things like deep breathing, especially if your exhale is longer than your inhale, that's activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is kind of removing the idea that there's a physical emergency happening. So I'm no longer in physical emergency mode. If I can then take my chemical cocktail of emotions, and like I said, maybe I can't go straight to the moon, but I can at least get to, like you were saying, can I get to pride, or can I get to awareness, or can I get to compassion, or can I get to empathy? Those are all going to help me get out of whatever current state I find myself stuck in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think at a higher level, what's beautiful is, we used to think the brain drove everything. But like when you talked about, when we got that monkey mind, right? Or we're just fixated on something, we can actually influence the brain with our bodies, right? We sometimes cannot outthink ourselves to get ourselves into a different state, because we get these ruts, right? These past, automatic behaviors. But as we can, there's a couple different ways to get into coherence. One is, and the listeners will be able to experience this right at the end, but as you focus your attention on the area of the heart, it sends different neural signals to the brain, right? So as we influence the quality of signals to the brain, it gets us into a deeper level of coherence. Another one, like Brett said, is if we can activate a positive renewing emotion, it starts to turn on all the good chemicals. And then there's some other ways to get in coherence. I mean, even doing squats, 5 seconds down, 5 seconds up. So a lot of times if we work again with military or folks where even feeling their hearts and feeling into their bodies can be really scary because it's new, doing the squats and, there's something around the science of 5 seconds down and 5 seconds up that allows for that person to start to feel a level of coherence.
Interesting. Interesting. I wonder if that's related to the 6 seconds in and 6 seconds out breath that's supposed to be quite equalizing. I don't know if that...
It might be. Like HeartMath, sure. We incorporate a lot of different techniques. HeartMath is a big believer of 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. We also do a lot of 5 seconds in through the nose, 5 seconds out through the mouth, because like you were saying, Alex, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. But if somebody's depressed or low energy, actually their parasympathetic might be overly active. And so to do the 5-7 would actually be detrimental for them. And
so they need more of an energizing breath or something like that.
You want more energizing, even the 5-5. And I forget, because both of us are just energizer bunnies. I forget that, I'm always trying to calm down, to get into that state. So
now that we understand the theory and the background to this, I'm really curious, how did you both personally decide to dedicate yourself to this? Like, what happened in your lives? What happened in your careers? Like, where did you get to the point where you thought, hey, my mission here is to go make sure that other people can have coherence in their bodies and minds and lives?
Yeah.
Well, I always call Jeff our mad scientist. He's our big idea guy in this partnership. But I'm grateful. We each talk about our own personal journeys, through the world of sports and entertainment and being in roles where we didn't always feel like, we were worthy of them or the responsibilities that we were being given. I remember it was about 7 or 8 years ago, we were building another business that was more business development driven, helping companies with growth and partnerships and strategy and things of that nature. And even as we were working with clients in that business, we were called in to usually help them overcome some level of dysfunction, or they were in a financial rut, and we were kind of coming in to make it rain, kind of save the day for them. And so the first thing that we always noticed was we had to create some behavioral shifts in the way that these leaders operated. Otherwise, they were just going to go back to the same patterns.
You can't jump straight to solving the external problem. You have to do some internal work first.
And so we would actually start to incorporate some of the learnings that we were practicing in our own lives to take them through an exercise, and their teams, by the way. It also helped us get a sense for, all right, what are we actually working with here? Where are the biggest challenges, right? And I remember one day Jeff called me, and his hair was on fire, and he was talking about more consciousness, more awareness. We need to really create more change for these senior leaders that we're representing, that we're working with. And I think we both benefited a lot from being part of organizations that were run by really successful people who seemingly had the perfect life on paper. And we saw the dysfunction kind of up close. And we also had a lot of friends that were, entrepreneurs building businesses, selling businesses. And for whatever reason, they weren't feeling, the internal reward of getting to that point. They were still running into hurdles in their kind of lives. And I remember writing consciousness, awareness, senior leaders, change the world on a whiteboard. And I candidly said to Jeff, man, I love this because we're both students of human behavior. We're both athletes. Jeff knows I wanted to be a coach when I was younger. I thought I was going to be on the sideline of a basketball court. So human behavior has been something we've been around athletes and entertainers and successful people since we were kids. And I was totally subscribing to this, like, yeah, there's an opportunity here for us. But man, my plate is so full right now. Like, how are we going to do this? And I challenged him to please, could you construct it? Can you get whatever is in your brain onto at least paper so that I could then contemplate, review, and think about how do we operationalize this? How do we actually make this into a business so that we can put all of our attention towards it? And, Jeff is always true to his word. He came back, a few months later, and there were some ideas on paper, and we were really fortunate. Obviously, the timing is everything, right? I mean, we really soft launched Paragon. What would you say, 2018, Jeff, is when?
Yeah, probably even 17. Yeah,
late 17, kind of into 18, as we were working on our other business. And we really committed to it in 2019. And then obviously the world changed in 2020. But a lot of it is the personal journey. Jeff, I think it's worth you sharing, if you're open to it, just a little bit about kind of how these techniques became really relevant for you in your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So like Brett said, we were in the sports entertainment world, and it was an amazing experience. And also, in that world, outer appearance is highly valued, right? And it's just part of the culture and part of our culture. And on my journey, I was fortunate to have these great jobs early on. And every time I got promoted, I felt more anxiety, imposter syndrome, and I could show up and kind of play the part with the mask on. But then on the weekends, I'd literally lock myself in my house for a day just to recover. And I didn't really, and part of that was I was just so empathetic and intuitive, but I didn't at that point see it as a gift. Right. And then my mom was not doing well. So I moved back to Denver, and as the low point, she took her life, and I hit rock bottom. And at that point, any value that I placed on how I looked to the outside world went away. I just couldn't feel.
How old were you when that happened? I
was 35. Yeah, I was actually in Denver. I'd moved back to Denver from New York City. And I just remember saying, like, I just don't want to feel like this. I don't care what I do, what I look like. Like, I mean, I literally would have run down the street in a chicken outfit. I used to say, I would have done anything to feel better. And so a lot of people, just have described kind of what I've gone through as a spiritual journey, but it started with just wanting to feel different. It was so painful. And I just didn't even feel comfortable in my body. I remember walking down Larimer Street and feeling so disconnected from the world. And it really scared me. And so a friend of mine introduced me to some of these tools and techniques that we share with our clients. And again, I had no other choice. I would have done anything. So I started to do them every day. And about 3 months into it, I can still remember this day. I woke up and I felt present. I felt some joy. And I probably felt deep gratitude for the first time in my life because, growing up, single mother, and I looked at the world very adversarial. I was very much a fighter. And so anytime I would feel a renewing emotion, I felt it was a weakness that I'd be vulnerable. And two, I didn't deserve it. Right. And so I felt that and I was like, oh my God, and I realized if I could go from where I was to there, right, feeling this, anybody could. And really because of that, and then sharing with Brett, I was like, again, if I can go there, anybody can, including all these CEOs and decision makers. And, we also would talk about how these corporations had such control on our planet, from healthcare, education, media, politics. And it was so driven by the ego. And some of it was just driven by their past behaviors and experiences. And because of their childhood and they never were educated around their own emotions or whatever, that bitterness or self-hatred was driving them to make really bad choices for humanity. And so we, Brett and I just said, we're going to create a company that's going to influence leaders and change how they feel about themselves to make different decisions. And again, we're going to Trojan horse it through performance and leadership and these things. And I mean, the reality is the things we teach are the ultimate high performance tool when we feel present and joyful and grateful. And so, from there, fast forward, like the pandemic, just the business exploded. And now we're fortunate. We work with a lot of Fortune 500, YPO. We think we've done 35 YPO events in the last 3 years, professional Olympic athletes, military, special forces. We're training astronauts to get them into Coherence. Whoa. We just led a couple hour session for global first ladies around the world. And obviously they have their own challenges. And then the next step is to hopefully work with their administrations around mental health and some other things. But we've really seen thousands of people's lives change. And I think it was really important that Brett and I went through our own journey. Brett, I think you should share your journey because I think a lot of people relate to it. But yeah, and also what's great is these tools and techniques are just so simple. And you don't, and you can do them in real time, right? And they happen so quickly.
Well, as Jeff was starting to introduce the techniques to me, we had a client. It was a large association whose leader, wonderful person, incredibly talented. She was really struggling though in board meetings, and we were there as their consultant to help them really kind of improve the business in a number of areas. And I was, Jeff and I, during our kind of daily strategy sessions, was talking about this client. And he said, the next time you're with them, I want you to just slow your heart rate down. And I want you to just focus on the center of your chest. And I want you to breathe calm into the air. And Alex, so I was not I had not yet been introduced to the HeartMath techniques. And I was wondering if he was watching an episode of like Star Trek or something. And I said, well, I looked at him a little sideways because I had just started my own mindfulness journey. And so meditation hadn't, I was starting for it to become a daily part of my routine, but I was still a bit of a skeptic, right, on this whole approach, right? Remember, I grew up with a dad from West Philly, and this emotions and meditation, this was not a part of my world as a kid. And so I said, okay, I'll try this because I've watched, Jeff in his own kind of transformation, and I was inspired by it. And so I remember sitting in a meeting, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna breathe. He said, focus, tension my heart, breathe calm into the air. And I did this over a period of a few days. We were at an event together. And I watched her. I could literally see her shoulders relax in these meetings. And she would even come up to me after, hey, that idea that you shared with me on email last week, I think we ought to try that. And she just felt like she was more comfortable in her own skin. So I called him and I said, why, what is this? He said, no, I'm not going to get into the science because you got to go meet our friends at the HeartMath Institute. So I went to Boulder Creek, California, and I met our friend Robert Browning. Shout out Robert Browning, love you, brother. And I had coffee with Robert for about 90 minutes, and there was something about this person's energy that was unusual to me. And I had met him on FaceTime a few times, Alex, but I had not met him in person. And I tell Jeff, I walked back across the street to my rental car, got in the car, and all of a sudden I felt tears streaming down my cheeks. I'd had a visceral reaction to being with this amazing person. I called Jeff. I said, "You're never going to believe what's going on right now." And he said, "Oh, I know it. I know what's going on." And that was my first introduction to understanding the power of the heart, that the magnetic field of a human being's heart and the emotional information that is carried in those waves, which is measurable by science, as we now know, was having an impact on me. And, this journey to do the work we're doing for us was, I think, was an evolution in the sense of like, how do we really serve? How do we help people? What is our purpose in this lifetime? What are we trying to accomplish? It isn't about generating more, abundance at the bottom line for our clients or more members or what have you. All that stuff is important and well and good, but what are we really trying to accomplish? And it's a a real purpose driven commitment for us to help people change the way they experience the world. And Alex, I don't believe in coincidences anymore. But at the beginning of the pandemic, our young adult son, he's now 21, had just graduated high school, and he started to experience some real severe mental health challenges. And it was very scary. And, they don't coach you on this as a parent. You just don't prepare when your child goes through health issues. And in that moment, after I'd been practicing these techniques for a long time and they'd been incorporated into my life, I've truly appreciated in the moment why we're doing the work we're doing. That the universe, it's like as if the universe needed me to go through this experience on a personal level to more deeply connect with the people that we're touching through our business. And I noticed in that moment that I was incredibly calm and clear and thinking, kind of like I was in flow, in a moment where I probably years earlier would have been freaked out or gone into victim mode. And so while I don't wish anyone to go through what we're experiencing as a family, and I have a lot of compassion for our son and what he's experiencing, I do believe that there's a deep connection to the work that we're doing. And when we share these stories, as you know, because we shared them when we were on stage at your summit last year, leading with that vulnerability, it changes the dynamic of the way that we get to interact with the people we're working with, some of whom are going to be a little skeptical, or they're going to be in a fight or flight state and not open to the change. And
wow,
so
these are incredibly inspiring stories from both of you. Brett, I'm really curious, when you met Robert Browning and then you went in the car and you started crying, were you crying because you had touched something in you that you didn't previously know of? Were you crying because you had been in his aura and his aura was resonating with you? Or what do you think was cascading through you at that point in time?
I feel like I'm on Alex's couch here. I don't know that I've ever done a deep dive like this on that experience.
Such a good question.
It is a good question. It was probably a combination of both, Alex. I think I just generally, energetically felt him. I felt this compassionate, loving human being. He's how many years at HeartMath, Jeff? 25 plus. I mean, he's been there almost since the beginning. So
got to give a shout out to Shevakar, his wife.
And
she's
Sheva, his amazing wife, who is a great friend and mentor of ours. I think it was a little bit of both. I think it touched something in me, Alex. I've always been an emotional person. I just could never connect the, why I was emotional piece of it. Right. And I feel like I've always been a caring person. It's not like I was totally shut off, but I didn't always have control over my emotions, especially as a kid. I was wound pretty tight. And I just think that Robert's, I think his magnetic field was just resonating at a really high coherence frequency that touched me in a way. And I was just so grateful to be able to meet him and to spend time with him. And we had already kind of taken flight with Paragon. And so I think it all in that moment kind of came together for me like, wow, okay, I'm starting to really understand this at a deeper level.
Awesome. So, hey, can we try it out?
Yeah. Should we do a little technique?
Yeah, I would love that. I would love that. And I do have more conversation items, but I feel like this is a great time for us to give it a try.
Awesome. Okay. So you want me to set this up?
So we're gonna, let's set it up. We're gonna do something a little bit different right now. Instead of just talking, we're gonna go through an actual coherence session. And Brett, you're gonna lead this.
Okay. So we're gonna do a technique. It's called quick coherence, and we are gonna start with a little bit of the heart focused breathing that we referenced earlier. Again, we want to shift the rhythms of the heart and send a clear neural signal to the brain, and then in the middle of that, I'm going to ask you to try to connect with a positive, renewing feeling. So something that provides you with a feeling of gratitude or joy. So Alex, what's something in your life that provides a feeling of appreciation or gratitude?
The great work that we're doing at Conscious Entrepreneur.
Amazing. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. And so for the listeners, we're going to ask you to connect with something that's realistic in the moment. So if you're having one of those challenging days, be realistic. It might just be calm, something that provides a feeling of calm or ease. It could be a pet. I've got my dog here with me in the office, as she always is. It could be a special memory, from a vacation or just a place in nature. All right. So these are techniques. They're meant to be done with your eyes open as you experience life. But in these sessions, we always encourage people to close their eyes if you're able. If you're driving and listening, obviously, please keep them open. And I'm just going to ask you to slow your breathing down. Just try to come into the present moment and feel your body start to relax with each exhale. And now drop your attention to the center of your chest, the area of your heart. And I want you to imagine that your breath is flowing really easily in and out of your heart or your chest area. Try to breathe a little bit slower and a little bit deeper than normal. And on your inhales, breathe into the area of your heart as if that's the only place where the breath can flow in. On your exhales, breathe from the area of your heart as if that's the only place the breath can leave from. If it's comfortable, we'll encourage you to count to 5 as you inhale, breathing into your heart or chest area. Count to 5 as you exhale, breathing from the area of your heart. Or just find a rhythm that feels comfortable. So this shouldn't feel difficult. It shouldn't feel strained. If counting to 5 is a challenge, just find a cadence that works for you with an equal count on the inhale and the exhale. So you're just focusing on the area of your heart. You're breathing a little bit slower and deeper than normal. Might even see if you can notice the subtlety of your heart beating or your pulse. And as you do, just make an attempt to connect with a positive, renewing feeling. This might be an emotion such as gratitude or joy. It might be a feeling of appreciation or care that you have for someone or something in your life. And just gently extend this renewing feeling to yourself. See if you can sense your heart opening up. And just share this positive, renewing feeling throughout your entire body. Commit to sustaining this feeling. Just continue to breathe in and out of the center of your chest. You might feel some warmth in this part of your body. Just continue to radiate this renewing energy to yourself. Take a few more gentle, deep breaths, breathing in and out of the heart. And just try to check in with yourself here. Just see if you can notice maybe a deeper level of calm or peace, stillness within your body. And just know that it's in this coherent place where we have the capacity to rejuvenate ourselves, to heal ourselves, and where we enable key centers within the brain to synchronize for optimal functioning, better decision making, clear thinking. Just know that this can become your natural state at all times, regardless of the circumstance or situation. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just give a quick reaction. I felt my shoulders kind of dip down. Actually, I felt my face fall into more relaxed pose. And I felt my breath, so my experience was I felt the breath relaxing and getting deeper, but I wasn't able to keep it at the 5 seconds or thereabouts the whole time. There were times when I felt like I had to breathe a little bit more aggressively because I wasn't getting all the oxygen I wanted or getting all the carbon dioxide out. But it felt really calming around the heart. And now that I'm talking back to you both, I feel very I feel very calm and at ease now in my chair.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
How is it for you, Jeff?
I love it every time. I mean, I feel completely at peace. My body feels great. I feel renewed. And you know what's
Brett's done this so many times. He's seen people just like go whoosh.
I mean, we lead people
benefit from leading it. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, we lead people through this all day, so we're getting all the benefit. I mean, we always talk about how we're like different people than 4 years ago. Our nervous systems are like, who are we now? So it's a blessing. I mean, because we are, and we lead a global. So we lead a global community call that we started during the pandemic, and we were doing it every day, 7 days a week. Now we do it on Tuesday and Fridays. And we've had people that have literally been a part of it for 4 years. So we've been leading those calls. And then we do it, with our clients and our team clients in private. But yeah, it's amazing.
It works. And this is something that, like you were saying earlier, you can do this with your eyes open. You don't need to go in. You don't need to go sit in a meditation room, or you don't need to separate yourself from whatever's happening. You can take this tool and immediately get the benefits of doing it. And I think that's just so effective, right now. So you can do it at your home office. You can do it in the car. You can do it in a meeting if you feel yourself getting triggered or stressed, and you're immediately going to be a better person because of it. So that's really, really cool. Hey, Jeff, I want to ask you about something I know that you're working on these days that is related to this. I want to ask you about the Transformational Healing Alliance and what that means and what you are doing in that group.
Yeah, so thank you for asking. So I mentioned the group that we created 4 years ago to really support our Paragon community, and that included clients, friends, family. And our focus was to teach people how to self-regulate their emotions, because, with that, a lot of things change. And then we would teach them how to get into group coherence. And then we do some sharing, right, to create community. And they got to take their mask off, and the power of vulnerability and just being in a safe environment. And there were people that were struggling before the pandemic that were thriving during the pandemic within our group. And something else happened. People started to have healings around all types of health stuff. And so there was a gentleman that found out about it, Jason, who's an amazing guy, who's actually funding research at Harvard, Stanford, MD Anderson, a number of other places. and it's all around healing beyond traditional means, really this energy medicine. So we've taken it to the next level. So we still have our Tuesday, Fridays, but every other Thursday, we have it's official protocol where we have multiple healers and one healee, one person receiving the healing. And as part of the protocol that matches up with MD Anderson and a few others, it's individuals with chronic pain. And so that person does a pretty intensive survey before, and then they give us feedback a day after, a week after, and 30 days after. And I think we've had 6 official ones that are a part of the data and the research. And then after 6 months to a year, we're going to get a paper published by, we're talking to a few universities right now. And I'm always careful talking about this stuff because we're all on our own journey. But, the first 3 or 4 people that had chronic pain for years have no chronic pain. And every time it happens, I know less about the healing process, right? And so we actually had a group that's, they've made some very famous documentaries, and their next one is going to be around energy medicine. And so they interviewed us and they said, well, what do you know about healing? And I said, not much, right? But with the surveys, and actually we have the Healy and healers wearing heart rate variability monitors to start to see patterns. And then when we do the in-person stuff, they wear these Sense AIs to measure brainwaves. But basically I said to her, we're not focused on the healing, right? We're focused on teaching people how to self-regulate, right? And then to create group coherence, and then just send love to a person. And we get to do this 3 days a week, and there's no attachment to anything else. And our group consists of doctors and CEOs and YPO members and all this. And one of them said on the other call, like, how special is it that we get to connect as a group this way and just send love, radiate love and gratitude out? Like, what else is there? And so we've seen these amazing results with the people receiving the healings, and the healers that are a part of our group have seen even better results, right? And
wow.
I'm telling you, we have researchers from Harvard Medical School and Stanford that thought it was all BS, and they've seen their friends heal, and now they're all in. And again, so like one of the things we wanted to invite your amazing community is to our Tuesday, Friday coherence sessions, which are at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific. And then also, if they're interested in this energy medicine, really healing beyond traditional means, it's every other Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Fantastic. Let's certainly put the call out for that. We'll put out the bat signal. That sounds like a tremendous initiative. As we're wrapping up here, Jeff and Brett, I've got a couple of questions I'd love to get your input on. And maybe I'll start with Brett for one and then go to Jeff for another one and so on. But curious about a couple things, since this whole show, this whole sort of journey we're on is about conscious entrepreneurship. Curious to get your thoughts on if you have a definition or how you think about what it means to be a conscious entrepreneur.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Well, one, I think a conscious entrepreneur is heart-centered. They operate from a high level of emotional intelligence and awareness. And I would say a conscious entrepreneur is less concerned with maybe what others are thinking of them, and they're more focused on prioritizing how they're showing up in the moment. So their own state of being is important to them. I also think a conscious entrepreneur thinks of others in a more empathetic or compassionate way. And as a leader, they're seeking to empower others rather than dictate. Right. I think that's, pretty good place to start. And, I think a conscious entrepreneur has a strong sense of themselves, and they're inspired to just keep learning and growing, and that legacy and purpose, that's sort of a mindset is, more of a priority than, gathering assets or, or financial gain or other, things that come with success. I think those are the first few things that come to mind when I think of a conscious entrepreneur. Jeff, I don't know if you want to piggyback.
Can I jump in
that.
on this?
Please jump in.
We just did a talk with a group. We were a keynote at a graduation of diversity, equity, inclusion folks. And one of the things we said is through our own journey, that personal growth equals professional success. So I know every time I went through a program around consciousness, spirituality, emotional intelligence, and I just became more evolved, or however we want to define it, the outside world responded to me differently. And also, we actually have a whole program of conscious leadership that we take our clients through. And it's self-evolution to team evolution to community evolution. The first part, self-evolution, is all about each individual taking ownership of their own potential and responsibility for their own growth, right? And that includes awareness of thoughts and emotions and being able to regulate the nervous system. And then the number one thing for team dynamics, team mastery, is each individual taking responsibility for themselves. And once we do that, and then we go into the team piece, we see magic happen, because then especially these executive teams, they're all really talented, but they live in silos and they're at such a high state. And when they can take the mask off and we can start to do things around trust, safety, vulnerability, the teams literally can start to bend time and create the miraculous, right? And then from there, we go to community evolution, and we basically anoint them Jedi Masters. And we say, because now you know the tools and teachings and how powerful they are, now you're responsible to bring these into your community and change other people's lives, families, teams, community partners. And we always share a vision with our clients, whoever the leader is. It's more than just touching them and their senior team. We literally do a diagram how they can influence hundreds of thousands of people. And so we do this with one of our contacts who's a CHRO at an Ivy League school, who's an amazing conscious soul. We showed her beyond the senior team how she can influence every student, every teacher, every alumni, right? And an entire community. And when you create a coherent community, really beautiful things start to change.
Wow.
And
wonderful.
happen.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you both. What are your personal practices like? So what do you do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? I mean, I got a sense about the quick coherence, but what else are you doing to maintain yourselves?
So Brett's laughing because it's like a laundry list.
Do we have enough time to cover it?
So when I get up in the morning, I know what I do helps set the day. And so I will do sort of these binaural beats around like theta brainwaves. And then I will do about 30 minutes of like ritual prayer, manifestation stuff that I've just studied around the world, with some different.
These are homegrown meditation and prayer, or things you would get from somewhere else.
Through some of the teachers I've studied with around the world in more Vedic tradition or mystery school or Buddhism. And I've really taken what lights up my heart, because I've learned, these rituals, at least this is my opinion, they can't be an intellectual exercise, right? They're used to ignite something within us, because that's how we open ourselves up, and then we're able to influence others, right? And so I think a lot of people have taken prayer or other things as this intellectual exercise, and they're not seeing shifts. And really our language to the universe, God, source, is through our feelings, right? And it's really interesting that quantum physics is now sort of catching up with the great avatars, the great Vedic seers and the Kabbalists and all this, who've been saying this for 4,000 years. And then I actually do the 5-7 breathing, to activate the parasympathetic. And then I love martial arts. So I have one routine that's developed by the Indonesian Special Forces, and it learned it from our friends at Vibravision, that literally increase your energetic field. And so I do that in the morning also. And then I have a number of other things that I kind of little reminders throughout the day, including the HeartMath stuff, right? Like Brett and I mean, it's crazy if ourselves 10 years ago were looking at us now, but we will set an energetic field before we lead a session for CEO groups or Navy SEAL or whoever. And we even did it before our call with you because it's really palpable. And again, science is starting to show how we affect our environment more than just us, but our environment. So,
yeah, Jeff talked about the morning ritual, which I was that person, a dozen years ago and before, where I would just get up, coffee, go right to work, right? Maybe I'd drop my kids off at school, but I was constantly, like, the minute I got up, I was thinking about the tasks of the day. And to be able to now shift in the way I treat my mornings, which start a little bit earlier than they used to, where I value that quiet time in the house before people are up and dogs are up. And, that's my sacred time. I need 60 to 90 minutes in the morning between, heart rate variability breathing. And we're measuring it. We mentioned the devices. So we want to make sure that, our own experience, that we have some data to support it. I've added in, multiple meditations throughout the day, in addition to the techniques that we lead for our clients. I don't go as deep as the martial arts, but I do like to spend time in the morning doing stretching, doing some light movement, some yoga. It could be just as simple as body weight stuff, push-ups or sit-ups, just to get my blood flowing and going. I've also started to describe, I was never a big reader growing up, but I now spend probably, anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes in the morning reading something. And then because I have a dog, I get to walk her. I make sure Jeff knows, like, if I'll get off a call, we're going for a walk. So this dog, my neighbors, they like to kid me that this is the most walked dog in the neighborhood, but I literally will walk her 3 to 4 times a day. And then I try to find a segment at night where my wife can join me so that we can at least connect kind of one-to-one and catch up on the day and all the different things that are going on in our lives with our kids.
Wonderful. Those are very helpful. And Brett, when you say that you weren't a reader previously, but now you've become one, this leads to the last question, which are, what are the resources that you like to share with the world? What are the things that you would most recommend other people check out? Books, videos, meditations, conferences, whatever it is.
I mean, we're always going to promote heart-focused breathing and the coherence techniques that we teach, obviously, because they're effective. And so we'll encourage your community to, to connect with you or with us in terms of how they can learn more about that. There's immense benefits when we, self-regulate ourselves. We see it every single day. The data supports it. We're big fans of Dr. Joe Dispenza. Obviously, his books, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. We know you are as well, Becoming Superhuman. These are books that we regularly send out to clients and friends to consume. I love Siddhartha. I've got Siddhartha on my shelf behind me, and The Alchemist. Those two are ones that I love to go back to and read. I've got The Four Agreements on my nightstand by Ruiz, which is just a classic. The power of now, Eckhart Tolle, one of Jeff's favorites. And then I just read a great book for this doesn't necessarily have to be just for the men, but I think it was written with more men involved. It was called We Need to Hang Out by Billy Baker, the Boston Globe writer. And it was just more about connection and the impact that loneliness is having in our society today. I listened to it on Audible. I kind of go back and forth between Audible and reading, the hard version in my hand. And then I'm a avid podcast consumer. So it's wonderful to be a guest on these, but Michael Gervais, the Finding Mastery podcast, is one that really enlightens me with all kinds of learnings every time I tap into him. So thank you, Michael, for what you do.
Brett took all mine. Brett, we were supposed to divide those. Thank you.
You probably have 1,000 more on your list.
My podcast, Definitely Conscious Entrepreneur, is my
the
go-to.
Conscious Entrepreneur is on your rotation. Yeah, absolutely.
I love all the more ancient text. I just think there's such wisdom, like the Bhagavad Gita. I think Yogananda, his writings, because he brings them into more modern times. I think it's really powerful. And I love quantum physics. I just think, there's so much, so is as below, so is above, right? That concept, and we're all connected. And I think if leaders really understood how truly connected we are, that there's no separation, and even our Mother Gaia, our planet, we would make different decisions. And I think sometimes when there's science and data behind it, it wakes people up in a different way. But yeah, those are a few of my favorites.
Fantastic. Well, hey, what a fun, inspiring, and enlightening conversation on how to regulate our emotions, how to get in touch with our hearts, how to take a moment, even just a brief moment out of a busy day, to re-regulate ourselves and pull up our energy when we need to. This is really inspiring and fun. And I super appreciate both you, Jeff, and you, Brett, for coming here and sharing your wisdom and your insights with all of us. Thank you. And thank you also for continuing to support the Conscious Entrepreneur community, having been part of our version 1 Conscious Entrepreneur Summit in 2022. Great to see you both, and thanks so much for joining.
Likewise. Thanks for having us.
We're on Team Alex, so anything you need, we're huge fans. We love what you're doing in the world.
This was fun.
Awesome. Super appreciate you.